now, and then I'm going to do the live recording on Facebook, and then I'll introduce everybody or introduce the march. Give me just a moment. If you see the floating head in my background, that's Diana. Hey, Brian.
Sorry for the delay.
You are good. You're just in time for the live start with Facebook. So are you good to go?
I'm good to go.
I love it.
Got my face mask off.
Well done. I see that. I'm going to go live, and then I'll start the show. Hello, Facebook world, Facebook friends and family in the US and maybe even across the world. My name is Simi Hundal, and I have with us today 3 great panelists that are community leaders in their respective spaces that will help shed light, best practices and their experiences on our theme for this month of what engages us. Again, this is the March for Unity, Civility, and Political Engagement. This month, we're focusing on the last topic, political engagement. And to recap the spirit and the origin of this march, let me start from the beginning. It was only a few months ago, before COVID-19 had really hit the United States, before we had seen an uptick in cases, before it was really something that most people knew about, when there was the impeachment hearings. And at that time, there was a lot of destructive conversation in Washington and across the country. It got to a point that in my mind, I felt like not only were we having poor dialogue across the aisle and not being able to move forward with constructive policies and legislations, as well as agreeing on truths, but also laying a poor foundation moving forward, not only for ourselves, but also not showing good leadership to other countries. And with all these factors in play, and with this help and support of friends of family, I marched with 2 other people in downtown Atlanta. And we marched to essentially have our voices heard in November, as well as to enhance the dialogue and the conversations that we are having through safe, bipartisan spaces in which we could share our opinions, have our voices heard, and learn something from somebody that has a different background and opinion than yourself. We've done that every month since February, the first Tuesday of every month. And we've moved to a virtual webinar setting since COVID-19 has really taken a hold of this country and affected our ability to assemble and to mobilize. And I'm very thankful for that, the ability to do that virtually, especially given that I am now in Houston, Texas, which is different than all of the 3 panelists that are here. In fact, we're all in our own respective cities, if not states. So with that spirit in mind and with that origin and the theme, I want to introduce the panelists, because that's really who I want you guys to hear from and who I want to give guests, attendees, as well as the panelists themselves a chance to hear each other speak about their experiences as it pertains to political engagement. So thank you for joining us. Let me go ahead and allow each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Going west to east, let's do that. Starting in California, Niku, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Niku. I'm out here in California, as Simi just mentioned. I just moved back here from Boston. I'm a recent graduate of law school and public policy school. and have generally been focused on the intersection of refugee rights, armed conflict, and counterterrorism over the last few years. I previously did about 8 to 9 years of refugee-focused legal assistance, and have now shifted my work more into the armed conflict space, and have been working on getting accountability, legal accountability for people in Yemen who have been victims of airstrikes there. So that's kind of the space I'm working in at the moment, but excited to hear from everyone else.
Thank you, Niku. And I want to brag on not only my friend, but my cousin, Niku, who just graduated from Harvard in both law as well as a master's in public policy. Congratulations again, Niku. And now going all the way to the East Coast, or nearly to the East Coast, let's start in Dunwoody, Georgia, just north of Atlanta. Massey Hundle, sticking with the family, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Massey Hundell, and I live here in Atlanta. I moved to U.S. Late 70s from Iran. I was born and raised there, and have been here for many years. Spent many happy years in Pittsburgh pursuing my schooling and an engineering program. And then spent many happy years in Baltimore and made our way south to Atlanta. Have been here almost 25 years. And it's a great place, and I don't think we're going to make a move anymore. I'm very family oriented, and the job and what I'm doing now is helping me to do what I do love best, which is help people to protect what's important to them and help them to protect themselves against everyday risk. I've been doing this for the past 10 years, and as I mentioned, Atlanta is a great place to be with 3 athletic children and 2 energetic dogs. The weather here allows us to do all kinds of outdoor things. So that's where we are.
Thank you, Massey Hundle. And if I didn't make it clear already, Massey is actually my mom, and I'm very proud of her, who has been an insurance agency owner for 10 years. And I'm looking forward to picking your brain about the topics today. And now, honorary Hundle family member, Brian Bollinger, who is in Atlanta, I think right now, but he lives in Clarkston, which is further east from Atlanta. So Brian, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Bollinger, and I am the Director of Community and Economic Development for Friends of Refugees here in Clarkston, Georgia, on the edge of Atlanta. But as you can see, yes, I'm actually at Georgia Tech today, the student center here, through the generosity of some very engaged construction firms in Atlanta, in particular Gilbane Construction and the Life Cycle Building Center. They're actually contributing almost $150,000 of the construction materials from the student center being demolished to build a community development center for the refugee community that's starting their New American Journeys out in Clarkston, where we'll get to engage whole other communities. So I'm really excited about that, but I didn't expect myself to be here as long as I've been here today, but it's been truly stunning to get to be a part of this. And Friends of Refugees has been in Clarkston for actually 25 years now, and we serve and join the stories of about 5,000 of our newest neighbors every year, and just be part of their journey of going from surviving to flourishing and giving back. And it's an extraordinary thing to get to be a part of and see those we once served serving beside us and coming to lead us now. So it's good to be here.
Thank you, Brian.
I am from rural Kansas, from a very small town with 4-digit telephone numbers. So for me to move to Atlanta 14 years ago has been a shock and a joy at the same time, but it helps me to feel more comfortable joining the small town story that we have out in Clarkston.
That's great, Brian. And we're lucky to have you. I'm going to brag on you as well. Friends of Refugees is an organization that I've been a part of in a very small way compared to Brian and some others in a volunteer capacity. And I've worked with the many refugees. To give you just a small sense of what they do and the community out there, East Atlanta and Clarkston, it's one of the largest areas for refugee resettlement in the country. You have people coming from all across the world speaking different languages with different cultures, and organizations like Friends of Refugees is able to bring them in, make them feel like they're part of the community. And where I helped was the Career Hub, which helped place these refugees on average or around 250 refugees per year were placed into employment or a better job through the employment services at the Career Hub. And I'm very proud to be a part of a special organization like Friends of Refugees. Thanks for joining, Brian.
Glad to be here.
For sure. So let me just quickly go over the format. Thank you all of the attendees that have joined on Facebook as well as here on Zoom. Unfortunately, only the people on Zoom will be able to do the Q&A. So if you would like to ask a question to one of our panelists as we go through the second section, which is the prepared questions that I've prepared for each of the panelists, please join us on Zoom, and then you'll be able to click the Q&A section at the bottom banner of your screen, and you'll be able to ask a question that I will be able to read in the third section, which is the ad hoc questions for our panelists. We are looking to wrap up around 5:30 Eastern, so I'm gonna get straight into the prepared questions, starting in the same order that I started the introductions. So let's start with Niku Jafarnia over in the Bay Area. Niku, you said in the Harvard Student Spotlight article I read recently that what is really key for me is to keep listening and learning to find out where I can be most useful. And that's what I'll do next. Many, including myself, this is not part of the quote, by the way, many, including myself, Simi, look up to the impact that you make, Niku, and want to engage in communities positively that are overwhelmed by the fires that are burning. What is your process, Niku, for identifying the area in which you can be most useful when there are so many areas that could use help?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question and super important. And obviously, this is just my perspective, and I'm sure there are many very intelligent people out there who have better answers to this. But I think from my standpoint, what I said in that quote, I think is more specific to once you kind of are in a space and you're already doing some kind of work. And I think at a certain point, people often just get caught up in doing what they think is the best and what they think might be the most effective. And I think when you're working with disenfranchised communities and marginalized communities, it's super important to just keep listening and making sure you're doing whatever they think is best and supporting in however way they think you can be most useful. I think in terms of actually just deciding what is the most useful thing for you to be doing to start with, though, I think it's really hard for a lot of people to make a decision like that, because kind of what you said, Simi, there's a million things that need work to be done on. There's so many different causes, and there's so many important things, and so many communities that could use support, and issues that can use support and need to be supported. And I think at the end of the day, we can't do it all, and they're all important. There's no question that there's no one thing that will just solve all the problems. It needs to be done in unison, and there needs to be people working on things from all different standpoints, from different areas of expertise, from different places, from different issue areas. It all needs to happen at once. It can't just be one singular thing at a time. And so I think it's just pick something that you feel strongly about and that drives you and that you feel some kind of fire about, and also that you think you'll be effective at. Like, I think there's so many different issues that I feel very strongly about. It's not just refugee issues or armed conflict or something. There's so many different issues that I care about, and I think they're all interlinked. They're not, you know, within their own silos, but I just kind of went into it with like, okay, this is something that I both really care about just as much as I might care about other things, but I also feel that with my abilities and my background, I'll be more effective here. And so I mainly focus on the Middle East because I think my Iranian background makes it easier for me to connect with refugees and victims of armed conflict in the Middle Eastern region versus other places. I have different language abilities. I focus on legal things because, you know, I went to law school, and that's where I can be most useful, even though I think there's plenty of things that pull at me, but that it's a combination of those two things. So hopefully that's helpful.
It is helpful, Niku, and I think what I appreciated as much as anything else in that response is that you start with listening to the communities as opposed to going in with your own assumptions and your own understanding of a situation, and trying to understand from the communities that you care about and that you want to serve where the issues are and where you can be of greatest help. So I appreciate that. And if the attendees have any questions, follow-up questions, again, the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom webinar is available to you to pepper Niku with any questions that you may have. Moving on eastward, just as we did with introductions, Massey Hundal, I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. You were born and raised in Iran before the revolution of 1979. The Iranian government, leaders, and laws have changed significantly since the time of the Pahlavi dynasty, the Persian monarchy in rule from 1925 to 1979. Please share stories and lessons regarding these changes in Iran since the revolution.
Okay, thank you for the question. As you mentioned, I was born and raised there, and I came to US in late 70s, and spending my teenage years in a country where you have very little freedom of speech, and always having the fear of people knowing what you may be thinking and what you may be disagreeing with the government, what the government has in place, played a big role in, when I was growing up. And also the fact that, I was a teenager, so I wasn't too involved, but I did have some family friends, their children who were in college at the time. And I know they were involved in demonstrations and voicing their opinion, and they were arrested, and even later on, they were executed for just voicing their opinion. So it was an era of, especially for young people who were involved in school, that they could not really voice their opinion. So the fact that I grew up in an environment with that fear, and the fact that we didn't have the freedom of speech, and then later on the revolution happened, and things did not really get much better. With a different government, but still we went from bad to worse, and some of the other freedoms were taken away. What I've taken away, and my experience has taught me, that we should not take things for granted what we have here, the freedom that we have, the opportunities that we have. And things can change little by little and can slip away very quickly, and it can get to a point that it's going to be difficult and impossible to get back to that. So what I want to take the opportunity is, and I've tried to do that within my family, with my children, with my friends, with my coworker, or whomever was listening, to share those experiences with them. So to let them know that these things can happen, and it's very quickly. And just take advantage of what they have and try get involved in selecting the local and the governments, and they get involved in the family, in the community, and in selection of your local and national people that you put in place to make decisions for you. So it is really important to do that. And I've done that by also, even in the work environment, I have encouraged my everybody who works here to use their voice to vote, giving them the time to do that, and shared my experience, where they were willing to listen to that. I'm hoping that our youth, the young people, also take advantage of listening to their parents and grandparents, especially if they have lived in a different environment under different regime, to understand how quickly things can change, or be able to compare the experience that they've had with what the opportunity that they have here in the US. I've been here for 40 years, and this country has given me a lot of opportunity that I'm very thankful for. But the US that I came to know 40 years ago versus what I've experienced the last few years is very different. And that's where I'm worried about, for us not to understand the danger of not getting involved, because that's when things can completely change.
Thank you, Massey. And I've heard it from you in different words, especially when you hear news on TV at home. But it's a good reminder to me, and I hope that others that have may have questions about your experience in Iran and how things did change would have the opportunity to ask that via the Q&A section at the bottom of our webinar. Moving on, last but not least, for the prepared questions, Brian, question for you. The Trump administration's refugee-related executive orders have put crippling limits on the immigration system, including suspending U.S. refugee assistance program for 120 days in the 2017 Executive Order 13769, and the recent public health order allowing the administration to reject migrants crossing US borders without giving them access to the asylum system until the government determines the new coronavirus no longer poses a danger to the public. What has been, for Friends of Refugees, approach to political entities to advocate for refugees, and how effective has it been?
I just realized I was still on mute. So I tried to come to a spot where I had a little better acoustics. Well, I guess if you'd asked me how effective has it been, I would say, well, it's still not solved, but we certainly, as a refugee serving organization, Friends of Refugees is a member of the CRSA in the state of Georgia, which is the Coalition of Refugee Service Agencies. And that is a collective effort by IRC, New American Pathways, Friends of Refugees, Somali American Community Center, a number of refugee serving agencies working together to have conversations with our political leaders and our legislators and the public to inform them and to essentially drive forward discussion about the fact that refugees and other new Americans are not a burden. They are a blessing. And though I have to say, probably well in tune with what the others have shared, is that it's been our experience that the changing of minds when it comes to matters of major policy and immigration, they are rarely changed by facts and information. And that's probably one of the most difficult, I guess, human realizations for us of the last 4 years, last administration, has been that fact and information is less correlated with changes of decision and direction than relationships and trust. And that's probably been the most difficult thing for us, has been to continue to be advocates and to continue to speak and to engage and to protest, but at the same time to go and seek out direct relationship with those who common sense would tell us are our enemies in these things. Because I think the history of diplomacy will tell you that it is when there is at least an amicable dialogue that is not part of the public dialogue occurring between greatly opposing sides that some of the greatest breakthroughs for justice have taken place. When the heat has gotten turned down enough that people can sit down and discuss some very deep differences in a way that is brokered by human connection, not by sound bites and footballs and points. And I'm not saying these are exclusive to one another. They are not mutually exclusive. They're very much mutually inclusive. But if we look at the history of, the Kissingers and the Eisenhowers, to pick from American history and other spaces, who have been able to advance good and justice and equity at moments when it seemed that it was impossible. That was how it was. That was how it was accomplished. So I guess that would be at Friends of Refugees. I think we like to think that what we endeavor to do is often to engage those who would otherwise be very much not welcoming towards our newest neighbors, and directly engage them in becoming a friend of a refugee. And then we watch the entire perspective change, and we watch that barrier, that person who is obstacular, change themselves from an obstacle to, at the very least, someone standing aside with an open mind, or perhaps even becoming an advocate.
Thanks, Brian. That's really good to hear from you and your experiences. There's a couple of things that stood out to me. One is that amicable dialogue that happens behind the scenes. Sure, at the public level, a lot of politicians, they need to put on face, and they need to be believers in what their base or what their constituents are believing. But at the same time, there needs to be some level of amicable dialogue between opponents on issues, so that you can move forward on those issues, even if it's not something that's a total win for one side or the other. And it's hard to see those types of dialogues happening right now with the kind of rhetoric that's happening in Washington. And the other thing that I want to point out is that facts and figures don't seem to carry as much weight over the past few years. And I think
what I would clarify, they don't carry as much weight as relationships do. And it is friendship that, I think it is human relationship that changes hearts and minds. It's rarely information that changes minds. When statistics become persons is when we become open to something different.
Sure, yeah, that's powerful. I have a question for you guys, because I do not have any questions right now from the attendees. You still have time, attendees. There's a couple more minutes before we wrap up. But given the timing right now, I wanted to take advantage to ask three people that I very much respect and want to hear the opinion of. Just a few miles from where I'm sitting right now in Houston, there is a protest, more of a march, excuse me, for the death of George Floyd, in response to the death of George Floyd. From your perspective, I would love to hear your thoughts as to what the response has been like across the nation. And for those that are mourning his loss and mourning so many others like him, how would you recommend Americans and people across the world to stand up for injustice in this time? Anybody that wants to jump in, the floor is yours.
I'll just quickly throw my thoughts in here.
Please.
I think this is such a key moment in history, and such a huge, huge opportunity for people to step up and do something that could be history changing in this moment. And I think now is the time, if you haven't been doing it for however long you've been alive, to really sit down, listen to what Black community leaders are saying right now, kind of in line with what we were just talking about listening to people. This is their moment, that they're calling for people to call. It's a call to action. And they are calling for people to get out on the streets and support by making phone calls, support by donating, support by showing your support and having difficult conversations with people, however you want to go about it, but showing support and solidarity with them. I think this will be a moment of great shame in the future if now is not a time where we're all standing up and doing that and standing in solidarity, because I think it's a really key historical moment that I didn't see coming right now, and really grateful that it's happening, and hope that it flourishes in the way that I hope that it does, and that the government doesn't currently seem to be supporting at all.
Thank you, Niku. And I know it's happening across the nation, including California. It's at times, it's from my perspective, it is scary with some of the riots that's happening. But to your point, Niku, don't let that detract from the incredible organization that's happening across the nation in solidarity of not only Floyd's family and his community, but so many communities that have experienced loss. And I hope that we can all stand together, understand each other, and getting back to what you said, Niku, and really the spirit behind this march, this very small march of just a mighty few, that we're just here to listen. We're trying to listen, hear people that are coming from different backgrounds and experiences so that we can come up with our best practices and a level of understanding to come up with the best policies, as well as just learn how to love one another as fellow Americans and fellow citizens of the world. So thank you, Niku. I think that's a great way to end as we've come up on the 30-minute mark. I really appreciate all of the attendees that were here, both on Facebook as well as on Zoom. I also thank all of the panelists that have been a part of this program since February. Well, at least the virtual panelists have started since April. And thank you for this month's current panelists. Niku, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you, Semi, and thank you guys too.
Thanks for having me.
For sure, Brian, thank you so much for being a part of it. I've loved working and interfacing with Friends of Refugees, and I'm looking forward to doing it in the future. You're making a great difference in our community.
I appreciate your encouragement. It's a great thing that we're just so grateful to get to be a part of. And as you said, at a moment in history where hopefully we can look back at some footprints that we can reflect on as having been in a good direction.
Absolutely, I hope so too. Massey Hundle, AKA Mom, thank you so much for all that you've done, and you've inspired me to do as well, to do good in the community. And most recently, thank you for coming on to this program. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for having me, and I'm so proud of you and what you're doing. Thank you so much. It was good to see everybody.
I appreciate it, likewise. So good to see you guys. We're going to have another march. And as we said at the beginning of the program, we're having a march every month, the first Tuesday of the month, to count down to Election Tuesday in November. And it will be at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see all of you there. Thank you for signing on, and have a great Tuesday night. Thank you.
Same to you. Bye-bye.